Just a novice, the princess thought, until the apex predators backed away. Best HFY Stories. Princess Alara sat on the edge of the worn metal crate, her fingers fumbling with the tiny wires of a drone she had borrowed from the colony's workshop. The drone was supposed to help scan asteroid minerals for the miners, but Alara had another idea. She wanted to make it fly farther, higher, and maybe even reach the edges of the asteroid belt where no human had gone for years. "Careful, princess," a voice called from behind. It was Jax, one of the older navigators. "You'll fry that thing before you even turn it on." Alara glanced over her shoulder. Jax leaned casually against the workshop wall, arms crossed, a smirk on his dusty face. She ignored the smirk and focused on connecting the last wire. "I know what I'm doing," she said. "I'm not some rich princess playing with toys." "I can fix this," Jax chuckled. "That's the problem. You think you know what you're doing." Alara ignored him. She tapped the controls on her small wrist console. The drone whirred and shuddered, then lifted a few inches off the crate. Her heart raced. It hovered, wobbling like a newborn bird trying to fly for the first time. "See," she said, smiling. "It works." For a moment, she felt proud. She wasn't Alara the princess, trapped in her gilded palace far across the stars. Here, on the dusty colony of Nova Mesa, she could be anyone. She could learn, explore, and maybe even prove that she belonged among the stars, not just in the stories told at court, but Nova Mesa was no place for idle dreams. The colony was small, built into the craggy surface of an asteroid, and its people worked hard to survive. Miners, pilots, engineers, and navigators, all trying to scrape a living from the rocks. And for years they had lived in fear of something worse than dust storms or space pirates, the apex predators. No one knew exactly what they were. Rumors spoke of massive biomechanical hunters that roamed the empty space between asteroid belts. Ships vanished, colonists disappeared. And when one survived to tell the tale, it was barely conscious, muttering about creatures with armor harder than starship plating and eyes that seemed to pierce through metal. Alara had heard the stories. Everyone had. But she refused to be scared. The apex predators were out there, yes, but maybe, just maybe, humans weren't helpless. Maybe the stories of monsters were exaggerated, meant to scare young colonists into obeying rules. "Your drone isn't going to survive a week out there," Jax warned, snapping her back to reality. "You're risking your neck, princess." "I'll be careful," Alara said. "I'm not just some royal who hides behind guards. I want to learn. I want to see." Her hands worked quickly, adjusting the drone's sensors. She had always been fascinated by the stars, the way they burned cold and bright, untouchable and yet always there. She had dreamed of piloting a ship, of exploring the galaxy not as a visitor but as someone who belonged. And now, in this tiny mining colony, she had a chance to start. When the drone lifted higher, she guided it out of the workshop and into the open sky of Nova Mesa. The asteroid's horizon was jagged, rocks stacked like a broken city, dust swirling in the artificial gravity. Beyond that, the void stretched black and infinite, dotted with distant suns. Alara's fingers danced over the console. She sent the drone farther, past the nearest mining rigs, past the skeletal remains of abandoned ships, and toward the outer belt. She knew she was pushing her luck. One wrong calculation, and the drone could be lost forever. But the thrill of exploration was too strong. Minutes passed. The drone drifted further, scanning asteroids for mineral traces. Suddenly, a soft pulse of light flashed from the far edge of the belt. Alara froze. "What is that?" she whispered. Jack squinted at her wrist screen. "I don't know, we haven't mapped that area." Alara's heart thumped. This was the edge of known space. Beyond that, no human had dared to travel. The pulse repeated, soft, rhythmic, like a heartbeat. And it wasn't natural. She could feel it in her bones. Something was out there. Something alive. Something watching. "Maybe we should," Jax began, but Alara cut him off. "No," she said firmly. "This is why we explore. We find the unknown." The drone hovered closer to the pulse, cameras feeding back images of strange metallic structures embedded in the asteroid belt. The formations were unlike anything human engineers had built. They were smooth, symmetrical, glowing faintly with energy. It was beautiful, eerie, and terrifying all at once. Then the drone buzzed sharply, alarms blaring. Alara's stomach dropped. A shadow passed over the camera feed, a massive shape moving too fast, too deliberate. The apex predators weren't just stories.
They were real. Jack swore.
Pull it back! Pull it back!" Alara hesitated. The drone was close. She could almost touch the alien structure through the feed. But the shadow loomed closer, and the drone's sensors went haywire. She had a choice: retreat or risk everything to investigate. Curiosity won. Alara guided the drone toward the structure. The pulse grew stronger, resonating through the asteroid belt, and then, as if sensing her intent, the apex predator stopped. The massive shadow hung in space, unmoving, watching her. Alara held her breath. The story said humans were nothing against the apex predators. Ships were shredded. Colonies were burned. And yet, here it was, hovering, waiting. For a moment, time seemed to freeze. The drone hovered near the alien structure, lights flickering. Then, slowly, deliberately, the apex predator retreated. It didn't attack. It didn't follow. It simply moved back into the void, vanishing into the darkness. Jack stared at the screen, open-mouthed. Did it just leave? Alara exhaled, her heart still pounding. Yes, she said softly. It left. She didn't understand why. She didn't know if it had seen something in her, in the drone, or in the humans themselves. All she knew was that she had survived. Not just survived, she had made the apex predator hesitate. And that, she realized, was something humans had never done before. Later, back at the colony, Alara sat alone in the workshop, staring at the glowing pulse on the drone's feed. No one came to congratulate her. Not yet. Jax was still shaking his head, muttering about recklessness. But Alara didn't mind. She had learned something more important than recognition or safety. She had learned that humans, even small, fragile, inexperienced humans, could reach farther than anyone thought. The stars were no longer distant, untouchable lights. They were a test. And Princess Alara intended to meet it head-on. As night fell over Nova Mesa, the colony's lights flickered like tiny constellations on the asteroid's surface. Somewhere in the black expanse beyond, the apex predators waited. But now, Alara thought with a smile, humans had something they hadn't before. Curiosity, courage, and a willingness to try. Maybe, just maybe, that would be enough. And for the first time, the princess didn't feel like a novice. She felt like an explorer. The day after the drone's strange encounter, Nova Mesa buzzed with whispers. Miners paused mid-shift to glance at the sky. Engineers hurried from one workshop to another, checking sensors and communications. The colony had always been cautious, but now the air itself felt tense. Princess Alara walked through the dusty streets, trying to look like she belonged. She carried her wrist console, where the drone's feed still glowed faintly. Everyone avoided asking what she had seen. Only Jax followed, keeping close but silent, as if afraid his voice might draw danger. I still don't understand why it didn't attack, Jax muttered finally, breaking the silence. They never hesitate. They're killers. Ships vanish, colonies burn, Alara shrugged. Maybe it's curiosity. Maybe they don't expect humans to act like humans. She tapped her console. Look at this data. The predator paused near the drone, then left. It wasn't random. Jack shook his head. You're imagining patterns in chaos. That's how people die. But Alara wasn't imagining. Humans had survived worse, and sometimes thinking differently was the only way to survive. She believed it. Hours later, the colony's alarms blared. Red lights flashed across Nova Mesa. The miners abandoned their rigs, and the navigators rushed to control stations. Somewhere in the distance, a deep, low hum vibrated through the asteroid. It was faint at first, then grew into a steady mechanical roar. They're here, Jack said, gripping the railing of the observation deck. His voice trembled slightly. The apex predators. They're actually here. Alara's pulse quickened. She stared at the radar screens. Shadows moved across the asteroid field faster than anything human pilots could manage, shapes larger than their ships, perfectly armored, almost liquid in motion. The apex predators had arrived, and they weren't here to observe. But something unusual happened. Instead of rushing to attack the colony, the predators hovered at a distance, watching, scanning, but not moving closer. Alara squinted at her console. The strange pulse from the drone's beacon was still active, glowing faintly in the asteroid belt. The predators seemed hesitant. Jax groaned. You did this. Your little experiment sent them a signal. Alara didn't reply. Her mind was racing. She realized that humans might have something no predator had expected. Unpredictability. The drone's pulse was chaotic, uneven, almost like a heartbeat. Maybe the predators couldn't understand it. Maybe they had never faced beings who didn't follow a pattern. Then we use it, she said quietly. We can't fight them with weapons. Not yet, but we can confuse them, draw them away from the colony. Jax looked at her like she had grown another head. You're insane. Elara smiled faintly. I'm a princess who refuses to hide. Help me or get out of the way. By evening, the colony's council gathered in the central hall. Miners, engineers, and navigators debated frantic plans. Some wanted to abandon the colony, evacuate, hide. Others wanted to fight, even though they knew the odds were impossible. Elara stepped forward. We don't need to fight them, she said. The room fell silent. We need to show them that humans are unpredictable. That we're clever, daring, and willing to take risks. They don't understand that yet. Show them? One engineer scoffed. You mean die trying? Not die, Elara said firmly. Win. Or at least survive. She pointed to her wrist console. The drone. It can reach farther than any ship. If we use it to guide the predators, we can make them hesitate, maybe even retreat. The council murmured. It sounded foolish, impossible. But Alara's determination, her calm in the face of fear, made people listen. They were tired of hiding. They wanted a chance. Within the hour, a plan formed. Small, fast ships would follow the drone, trailing flares and signals to create false paths. The predators would chase the unpredictable lights, giving the colony breathing space. Elara was to pilot the drone herself. The council hesitated. She was a novice, but she insisted. Jax finally nodded, realizing that she wasn't just a princess. She was a leader. Night fell over Nova Mesa. The asteroid's surface glowed dimly with the colony lights, while beyond the blackness stretched endless. The apex predators moved closer, sensing the activity. Their massive forms glinted in the faint starlight, fluid and terrifying. Elara guided the drone into the belt, her hands steady despite the adrenaline pounding through her veins. The drone's pulse flickered, sending the chaotic signal into the void. Immediately, one of the predators shifted direction, drawn toward the beacon. They noticed it, Jax said. His voice was a mix of fear and awe. They see it. Yes, Elara whispered, and they don't know what it means. The predators followed the pulse, like shadows hunting light, moving faster than any human ship could chase. Yet their movements weren't random. They were studying, analyzing, trying to understand. Elara grinned. Humans had never been predictable. That was their greatest weapon. Minutes turned into hours. The colony watched from observation decks and control rooms, holding their breath. Every flicker of the predator's shadow, every change in their course was a small victory. The humans were not helpless. Not anymore. Suddenly, one predator veered too close to an asteroid, miscalculating its trajectory. The drone emitted a pulse, almost like a warning, and the predator swerved just in time, avoiding collision. Elara's hands shook with excitement. It worked. They could guide the predators, manipulate their movement without firing a single weapon. But the predators adapted. One of them, larger than the rest, began moving independently, ignoring the drone's signals. It was clever, faster, and stronger. Elara felt a chill. The simple plan wouldn't work if they didn't adjust. We need another signal, she said quickly. Something unexpected, something human. Jax raised an eyebrow. Like what? A dance? A song? Elara smirked. Close enough. She instructed the engineers to create a series of erratic light patterns and sudden movement pulses from the colony's mining ships. They wove through the asteroid field like fireflies, chaotic, unpredictable, yet controlled. The predators hesitated. The one that had broken formation stopped mid-flight, scanning the lights with alien precision. And then, slowly, the entire pack pulled back. The signals, the chaos, the human ingenuity, it confused them. Elara exhaled, almost laughing in relief. The apex predators had retreated. Nova Mesa was safe, at least for now. Jack shook his head, amazed. I can't believe it. You did it. Elara smiled, exhausted but exhilarated. We did it. Together. We can survive because we think differently, because we try differently. The council cheered, miners hugged one another, engineers clapped, and even the skeptics had to admit that the young princess had done something remarkable, not just surviving an encounter with the apex predators, but making them hesitate. That night, Elara stood alone on the observation deck, looking out at the dark expanse of the asteroid belt. The predators were out there somewhere, waiting, calculating. But humans had shown they were clever, daring, and unafraid. A sense of purpose filled her. She was no longer just a novice. She had led, inspired, and proved that humans, even small and fragile, could stand against something unimaginable. The stars above shimmered cold and distant, but now they seemed reachable. They were challenges to conquer, mysteries to explore, and Alara intended to face them head-on. Somewhere in the void, the apex predators lingered. And somewhere in her heart, the princess knew they would return. But this time, humans would be ready. And Princess Alara would not run. The calm after the first encounter was short-lived. Nova Mesa's miners, engineers, and navigators were still celebrating their victory when a new tremor shook the asteroid. It wasn't from mining, nor from a minor collision. The deep, mechanical roar of the apex predators returned, louder this time, closer, more deliberate. Alara stood at the observation deck, her wrist console in hand. She had hoped that the predators' retreat was permanent. She had hoped that humans' unpredictable signals had been enough. But now, staring at the massive shapes moving with terrifying precision through the asteroid belt, she realized the truth. The predators were testing them. They had returned to challenge humanity directly. "They're stronger," Jack said beside her, voice tight. "And smarter, I've learned." Alara's hands tightened on the console. "Then we have to be smarter too. Faster. More unpredictable. We can't just react, we have to lead." The council convened immediately. Plans were drawn, debated, and discarded. Weapons were limited, ships were small, and the Predator's speed and strength made direct attacks suicidal. Nova Mesa's only advantage was its environment: jagged asteroids, narrow canyons, and human ingenuity. Alara spoke up. "We lure them into the asteroid field," she said. "We use the terrain, the drones, and the colony's ships. They're fast, but the field is unpredictable. They rely on precision. We rely on chaos." Some council members exchanged doubtful looks, but Alara's confidence was magnetic. She was no longer the novice who tinkered with drones. She had led humans to survive, and they would follow her again. By midday, the plan was in motion. Hover ships buzzed like angry hornets through the asteroid field. Flares streaked across the void, moving in patterns that seemed random but were carefully designed by Alara and the engineers. The drone, upgraded with extra boosters, zipped ahead, pulsing its chaotic signal into the darkness. Alara guided it personally, her eyes scanning the radar, her fingers dancing over the console. Every movement had to be precise yet unpredictable, a contradiction she had learned to embrace. The apex predators advanced, their metallic bodies reflecting starlight, their movements sharp and deliberate. One predator, larger and darker than the rest, moved independently, breaking formation, testing the humans' defenses. Alara's heart raced. If that one predator succeeded, it could destroy the entire colony. "Keep it distracted," she ordered. "All of you. Don't let it near the colony." Ships veered left and right. Flares fired, and the drone zipped between asteroids, pulsing its signal. The predator mirrored their movements at first, calculating, adapting, learning. But then it misjudged a narrow canyon. One wing scraped the asteroid's edge, sparks flying. It corrected quickly, but humans had gained the advantage of hesitation. Alara's eyes widened. "They're testing us. They respect a challenge. That's why they hesitate. They think we're weaker than we are. But we're not." Minutes felt like hours. The predator that had broken formation circled closer to the colony, faster than any ship could intercept it. Then she had an idea, one that seemed reckless even to herself. "Jax!" she called. "I need you to take one of the mining ships. Follow me. I'll draw it into the canyon. You're the backup if I fail." Jax hesitated. "You're insane. I'm a novice no more," Alara said, determination shining in her eyes. "Trust me." She activated the drone's full power, sending a dazzling chaotic pulse into space. It zipped ahead, drawing the predator's attention. Then, in a daring maneuver, Alara guided a small hover ship herself, weaving between asteroids with terrifying speed. The predator followed, drawn by the signal, ignoring all other ships. Jax followed close behind, ready to intervene. Other colony ships flared their lights, creating a confusing trail. The predator lunged, snapping its massive mechanical jaws, but the narrow canyon forced it to slow. Every twist and turn brought it closer to human-designed traps, magnetic nets, energy pulses, and carefully placed mining explosives. Alara's mind raced. Every decision counted. If she hesitated, the predator could crush them in seconds. She recalled the lessons from her first encounter. Unpredictability was her weapon. Humans were chaotic by nature, and the predator could not fully calculate their decisions. She veered sharply, the ship skimming the asteroid walls. Sparks flew as the Predator tried to follow. The magnetic nets latched onto its legs, slowing it momentarily. The mining explosives detonated behind it, forcing it to retreat slightly. Alara gritted her teeth. One Predator had been stopped, but more were still out there, observing. She needed to end the confrontation decisively, or Nova Mesa would remain under constant threat. Then she remembered the pulse from the drone, how it had caused the first hesitation. If she could amplify it, use it with precision, she could create a signal the Predators couldn't ignore. "Jax, get ready to deploy the flares in a new pattern," she called. "I'm going to push the drone ahead and amplify the pulse. We'll make them think we're everywhere at once." The two worked in perfect coordination. The drone darted forward, emitting a bright, chaotic signal. Ships flared left and right, creating impossible patterns. The Predators paused, scanning the signals, unable to predict which was real and which was a trap. Alara's pulse raced, but she felt a surge of triumph. Humans were clever, daring, and adaptive. They were proving that intelligence and courage could outmatch sheer strength. Then, a Predator lunged from above, faster than she had anticipated. Alara dove into a narrow gap between two asteroids, narrowly avoiding collision. Sparks flew from her ship, but she held steady, guiding the Predator into a trap of energy pulses. The Predator struggled, confused by the human chaos, and finally withdrew, retreating toward the edge of the asteroid belt. Jax let out a long breath. I can't believe it, you did it." "You actually stopped them." Alara shook her head, smiling but exhausted. "We did it. Not me alone. Humans together. That's why they hesitate. That's why we survive. The other Predators, seeing one of their own retreat, slowly pulled back as well. They hovered at the edge of the belt, massive and intimidating, but unwilling to press further. For the first time, Nova Mesa had survived an encounter with the apex Predators without a single casualty. The colony erupted in cheers. Miners hugged each other. Engineers high-fived. Even the skeptics nodded in awe. And through it all, Princess Alara stood at the observation deck, hands resting on her console, heart pounding with triumph. Somewhere in the void, the Predators lingered. Somewhere in the darkness, they waited, calculating, learning, and perhaps respecting humans for the first time. But Nova Mesa had proven something undeniable. Humans were clever, daring, and unpredictable. They were worth noticing. Alara's eyes glimmered as she looked at the stars. She had faced the apex Predators, guided her people through danger, and forced respect from beings thought unstoppable. She realized she was no longer a novice. She was a leader, an explorer, a human capable of daring the impossible. The Predators' shadows faded into the distance, but their presence remained in the back of every colonist's mind. Alara knew this wasn't the end. The apex Predators would return, stronger and smarter, but humans had learned too. They had learned that courage, creativity, and unity could make even the most terrifying forces hesitate, and Princess Alara intended to make sure that when the Predators came back, humanity would be ready. The stars above glimmered like distant promises. The asteroid belt stretched endlessly, full of danger and opportunity. And in the heart of it all, a princess once thought a novice smiled, ready to face whatever came next, because for the first time she understood humans were unpredictable. Humans were clever, and humans, no matter how small or inexperienced, could make even apex hunters step back. The frontier of space had tested them, and humanity had answered. The calm that followed the apex Predators' retreat was different this time. Nova Mesa had survived the impossible. For the first time, the colonists felt something they had never felt before: pride. Humans had faced a force that had been feared for generations, and they had not only survived, they had made it hesitate. Princess Alara stood at the edge of the observation deck, her fingers tracing the smooth railing. The black void of space stretched endlessly before her, dotted with distant stars that glittered cold and distant. Somewhere out there, the Predators lingered, silent, massive, and perhaps, just perhaps, respectful. Jax approached her, his usual smirk replaced with a thoughtful silence. "You did something today," he said quietly. "Something none of us expected, not even me." Alara shook her head, smiling softly. "We did it. Not just me. Every miner, every engineer, every navigator, everyone worked together. We used our brains, our instincts, our courage. That's why they hesitated." Jax nodded. "Still, I can't believe it. You actually led us through all of it." A princess, leading humans against Predators thought unstoppable. Alara laughed lightly. "I wasn't a princess today. I was just a human." And humans are unpredictable. That's our strength. The colony gathered soon after. For the first time in years, they held a celebration, not of survival alone, but of ingenuity, courage, and unity. Miners danced awkwardly on the uneven surface, engineers shared mechanical jokes, and navigators recounted the daring maneuvers that had forced the predators to retreat. Alara moved through the crowd quietly, accepting congratulations, but also observing. She noticed something she had never realized before. The colony was more than just a collection of people trying to survive. It was alive, resilient, and capable of greatness. And now, they all believed it too. That night, after the celebration, Alara returned to the workshop where it all began. Her drone, now repaired and enhanced, hovered quietly above the workbench, its pulse faint but steady. She reached out and touched it, remembering the moment it first drew the apex predator's attention. It was strange to think that such a small device, so fragile, so ordinary, had become the colony's most powerful tool. A simple human creation, guided by curiosity, courage, and cleverness, had made apex hunters hesitate. A voice startled her. "You're not thinking about stopping here, are you?" Alara turned to see Jax leaning against the doorway, arms crossed. "I was thinking," she said slowly, "that this is only the beginning. The predators will return. Stronger, smarter. Nova Mesa will need more than luck to survive next time." Jax raised an eyebrow. "And you're ready to lead them again?" "I am," she said firmly. "Not because I want to fight, but because I refuse to run. Humans can't hide forever. We survive because we think differently, because we work together, because we dare to try." Jax shook his head, a small smile forming. "You're not a novice anymore. You're a true leader." "I didn't think it was possible, but you've changed everything." Alara smiled. "Not just me. All of us. We all changed today, and we'll keep changing. That's what humans do." The next morning, the colony awoke to a new day. Nova Mesa's sensors showed no predators nearby, but everyone remained alert. Training drills began, ships were upgraded, and defenses improved. The colonists were no longer terrified. They were determined. They knew that danger would come again, but they also knew they could meet it. Alara walked among the people, offering guidance, encouragement, and occasional corrections. Her role as princess no longer mattered. What mattered was leadership, courage, and the ability to inspire humans to rise to any challenge. By mid-afternoon, she climbed back to the observation deck, looking out at the asteroid belt. The predators had vanished from sensors, but she knew they were still out there. Somewhere, massive shapes moved through the void, calculating, waiting, perhaps even learning. But humans had sent a clear message. They were not helpless. They were not prey. They were clever, daring, and unpredictable. Alara tapped her wrist console, bringing up the drone's feed. Its pulse now glowed steadily, a symbol of human ingenuity. She adjusted the settings, sending the signal farther into the asteroid belt, a quiet message to any who might watch. Humans were ready. Suddenly, a small blip appeared on the radar. An unknown vessel, moving fast, weaving through the asteroids. The colony froze, tense. Could it be the predators returning? Alara's heart raced, but she smiled. She had faced fear before. She had guided her people through danger. She had survived when no one thought it possible, and now she was ready for whatever came next. The blip moved closer, and as it came into view, the colony saw it was not a predator. It was a human scout ship, long overdue from a mission near the outer belt. Relief washed through Nova Mesa. Alara laughed, the tension breaking. "See? Not every unknown is danger. Some things are opportunity." She turned to Jax, who had been watching silently. "And humans never stop exploring. That's who we are. That's why we survive. That's why we matter in this vast, cold universe." As night fell over Nova Mesa, the colony lights flickered like stars against the asteroid's dark surface. Somewhere beyond, the real stars stretched endlessly. And somewhere beyond that, the apex predators waited, observing the humans they had underestimated. Alara watched the horizon, a quiet determination in her eyes. The predators might return. The universe might throw challenges too vast for any single human to face. But she had learned something more important than survival. Humanity was strong because it dared. It was clever because it never gave up. And it was unstoppable because it refused to accept fear as the final answer. Nova Mesa was no longer just a fragile mining colony. It was a symbol of hope, a beacon of human ingenuity and courage. And in the heart of it all stood a princess who had once thought herself a novice, now a leader, a strategist, and an explorer ready to face the stars. The drone's pulse shimmered faintly, echoing across the asteroid belt. It was a signal, a warning, a promise. Humans were here. Humans would endure. Humans would thrive. And somewhere in the darkness, the apex predators paused. For the first time, they hesitated, studying the humans they had once dismissed as weak. Perhaps they had underestimated what it meant to be human. Alara took a deep breath, feeling the weight of the stars and the vastness of space around her. She knew the predators might come back. She knew new dangers would arise. But she also knew the truth that had guided her through every challenge. Humans were never truly alone. Humans were never truly powerless. Humans could rise, adapt, and survive, even against the apex of the universe. And with that thought, she smiled. The frontier stretched endlessly before her, and she would meet it head on. Because no longer was she a novice. She was human, and that was enough.